Hi, I'm Hal Roberts. This is Bridge City News. Here's some of the top stories we've been following. As many Canadians continue to struggle with the high cost of groceries, a number of angry shoppers plan to launch a protest next month against Loblaw. A company which specializes in cold food storage is investing $222 million into the town of Coaldale, Alberta. And the Israeli military says it will hold off on launching a major offensive in the Gazan city of Rafah for now.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Roberts.
Thanks so much for joining us. Starting in May, a number of unhappy grocery shoppers upset with the cost of food will be launching boycotts of some of our top grocers here in Canada. The boycott, originally targeting Loblaw on Reddit, has now grown to 56,000 members on a subreddit page called Loblaw is Out of Control. There's also a list of demands to Loblaw from organizers of the boycott that includes signing a grocery code of conduct and committing to affordable pricing. Loblaw President and CEO Per Bank says the company is paying attention to customers and sees them trying to mitigate inflation by seeking out sales and shopping at discount stores. The grocer is responding through new promotions. Some boycott participants who are upset with the high cost of groceries plan to not only forego Loblaw, but also Metro and Empire stores beginning next month. The Alberta government announced that the Dutch company Newcold will be investing $222 million to develop an agriculture facility in Coaldale. It'll be the first of its kind in Canada. Newcold offers innovative and sustainable cold food storage solutions. Government officials say $2 million taxpayer dollars will also help the rural stream to create 50 permanent and 200 temporary jobs. Jobs Minister Matt Jones says the project will not only create good jobs, diversify our economy, but will also help to boost Alberta's agriculture sector.
Our government's programs and policies have created an investment and business-friendly environment, which I heard about this morning. At 8%, Alberta has the lowest corporate tax rate in Canada and among the lowest combined rates in North America. We continue to remove barriers for workers and to attract talent to our province in high-demand areas, including the skilled trades. And our government's efforts to cut unnecessary red tape, modernize regulations, and reduce administrative burdens have saved Albertans and businesses more than $2.75 billion since 2019.
The province also announced that it is developing a plan to improve passenger rail service here in the province. The new rail master plan will look into the feasibility of passenger rail service, including intercity commuter and high-speed trains. Officials say this new plan will be vital in advancing passenger rail service in Alberta. Premier Danielle Smith says she's confident that once this network is built, it'll improve daily life and work, boost the economy, and take away the stress of long-distance traveling. It should also help bring in a few extra tourism dollars.
We know that passenger rail lines through the mountains are very popular and provide passengers with views and experiences they cannot duplicate in a car or truck or bus or plane. But right now, those experiences end in Banff and Jasper without regular and simple connections to our major cities. There's an opportunity here that we would be foolish to disregard. Another opportunity should not be cast aside is that of a high-speed passenger rail line connecting Edmonton and Calgary with a stopover in the midpoint in Red Deer. Passenger rail between these three cities offers more opportunity, not just for visitors to our province and those looking to visit family and friends. It is an opportunity for business people who want to work the convenience of a quick trip, the ability to get work done on the way, and the possibility of avoiding lengthy airport security processes.
An additional 100 firefighters are being hired to help battle the various wildfires still burning here in Alberta. Forestry and Parks Minister Todd Loewen says the extra hands are needed to respond to multiple blazes across the province. Loewen says with Budget 2024, Alberta will also be bringing in 2 additional air tanker groups to help battle those fires.
2 new night vision equipped helicopters, of which one you can see behind us here. And we have also invested in additional funds into the Community Fire Guard program administered by the Forest Resource Improvement Association of Alberta, also known as FRIA. These investments will result in significant improvements to our wildfire operations, allowing us to better protect Alberta's communities and forests from the impacts of wildfire. Our enhanced night operations will benefit from these Budget 2024 investments. During the 2023 wildfire season, Alberta Wildfire piloted piloted several programs, one of which included wildland firefighters and personnel working extended hours to combat wildfires. Fire behavior is typically more subdued at night, as temperatures are usually lower and humidity is higher. The addition of 2 night vision equipped helicopters will allow us to carry out an increased number of nighttime helitanking operations, which is just one of the ways we're working smarter this wildfire season.
Emergency officials say there are currently 49 active wildfires still burning in Alberta, with 13 burning in the high-level forest area and 10 in the Slave Lake region. Officials say 31 of the wildfires are carried over from previous years. You know, we could use a little more moisture in many regions of the province right now. It has been very dry and fairly warm, and lots of wind here in southern Alberta. Jeanette Rocher is now with an early peek at the forecast. Jeanette, it appears as though the warmer temperatures may actually be leaving us for some of the week.
Yes, we are about to dip back into some single-digit temperatures for the rest of the week. In fact, today being the last of the nice teen-digit day of 14 degrees, dipping down to 8 degrees tomorrow. Now, you also mentioned the moisture and how much we need it. Well, ask and you shall receive, Hal, because starting Tuesday, it looks like we are going to be seeing some flurries mixed with showers, and then that should last right through Tuesday night, and then actually right through the week. It's going to be a very wet, snowy, rainy week right until the weekend, and I'll be back later in the show to tell you more about that.
More moisture. Thanks so much, Jeanette. That's good news. Political leaders are condemning remarks made during a protest in Vancouver where a speaker praised the October 7th attack by Hamas on Israel. The speaker at Friday's rally at the Vancouver Art Gallery called the killing of the 1,200 people heroic and brave. BC Premier David Eby says the comments were completely unacceptable and the most hateful he could imagine. Others who condemn the remarks include Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim and BC Opposition Leader Kevin Falcon. Colleges across the United States, meanwhile, have asked student protesters who are supporting the Palestinians to clear out of tent encampments with rising levels of urgency. That included an ultimatum from Columbia University.
Earlier today, President Shafiq sent out an email announcing the end of negotiations and declared explicitly that the university will not divest from Israel. The university has conducted itself with obstinacy and arrogance, refusing to be flexible on some of our most basic points. That said, we were engaging in good faith negotiations until the administration cut them off under threat of suspensions. Where we asked for amnesty, they gave us more discipline.
TBN Israel's correspondent Yair Pinto says Hamas has once again rejected a hostage deal. The Jewish state is trying to get back many of the 130 hostages which are allegedly still being held by the terrorist group in Gaza.
The Israeli negotiating teams recently presented a far-reaching proposal from the point of view of the Israeli government. This proposal was appreciated by the mediators, mainly the United States, who saw it as a possibility for a breakthrough in reaching a deal. But Hamas rejected it almost immediately. The Hamas rejection of the Israeli proposal brings Israel to a critical decision regarding Rafah, where there are currently about 1 million Gazan civilians and 4 Hamas battalions that have not yet been dealt with by the IDF. There is also a strong possibility that Sinwar and senior Hamas leaders are staying in the tunnel underneath the city of Rafah, surrounded by Israeli hostages who they intend to use as human shield.
The Israeli military has appeared to bow to pressure from the U.S. government and said it will not move forward with a military offensive in the Gazan city of Rafah. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari explains why.
Because they are allied with the United States, because they rely on the United States, there's a lot of pressure coming from the White House, and they have decided to take a pause and to wait until they see what the United States says. But Antony Blinken this morning did say that Hamas would be stupid not to take this incredibly generous, and he used the words, incredibly generous offer by the Israelis that's on the table right now. So we shall see. A lot of people don't realize how many great offers Hamas has rejected. So when people say ceasefire now, it's not in the hands of the Israelis. Hamas, a terror organization, has every ability to put down its weapons and to surrender, making it a ceasefire.
Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will have more on the war between Israel and Hamas, along with Israel and Hezbollah, coming up later in our program. Federal Immigration Minister Mark Miller says international students will be able to work off campus for up to 24 hours a week beginning in September. The Trudeau government temporarily waived the 20-hour cap on work hours for international students during the COVID-19 pandemic in a bid to help ease labor shortages.
Looking at best practices and policies in other like-minded countries, most of them limit the number of working hours for international students. Canada's rules need to be aligned, or we will find our programs attracting more and more applicants whose primary intent is to work and not study. We also want to follow the research and continue to improve the integrity of the entire international student program. To be clear, the purpose of the international student program is to study and not to work. So with these considerations in mind, we intend to make permanent changes to allow up to 24 hours of off-campus work for international students, with a goal of having that in place for the fall.
An oil field equipment supplier here in Alberta will have to pay $360,000 related to a workplace fatality. The courts say Isolation Equipment Services pleaded guilty to one charge under the Occupational Health and Safety Code for failing to take measures to eliminate the danger of equipment or material that was moved or dislodged. This stems from an incident on a Red Deer construction site back in January 13th of 2022 when a worker died after being hit and pinned by a valve bonnet that was released from the rigging of a crane. Officials say $359,000 of the $360,000 will go toward Energy Safety Canada to develop training programs to help new and young and inexperienced workers. The remaining $1,000 is going towards a fine. This past weekend recognized a day to honor and remember workers who've been killed, injured, or suffered an illness resulting from work-related incidents. Each year on April the 28th, people across Canada and around the globe stop to remember these workers. On Monday afternoon, a special ceremony was held at Mountain View Cemetery in Lethbridge, where several wreaths were laid. Roses were also dispersed by first responders, officials with the City of Lethbridge, the Chamber of Commerce, along with the provincial government and the Canadian Union of Public Employees. In the past year, 165 workers were killed across Canada, including one occupational-related illness fatality here in Lethbridge.
A day to reflect on our current health and safety practices and how we could improve on them and ensure that our workers are protected and they return home safely at the end of the day, which is all we would like. Especially for those workers that are not part of a union, that don't have a union to back them up, if they bring those concerns up to their employers. They have to make the decision whether they're going to carry out the unsafe task or bring something up, and they could lose their job and their source of income.
It is a sad day, and it's a huge initiative on behalf of the families right across Canada for people that have passed away from workplace tragedies. So it's a good reminder every year, and that, you know, it's all of these fatalities have real consequences, long-term consequences for the families.
The National Day of Mourning was officially recognized by the Canadian government back in 1991 and has spread to about 80 countries around the world. The City of Lethbridge announced that Green Cart curbside collection returns to weekly collection beginning this week. The seasonal approach to collection accounts for variations in yard waste and will help curtail the odor factor during the warmer months from the household organics. City officials say over the past year, close to 6 million kilograms of organic waste has been diverted from the landfill thanks to the curbside green carts. That averages out to 175 kilograms of organic waste per household here in Lethbridge. Alberta was named one of the top 5 happiest provinces in Canada. The study by the online gambling site Lucky Days said it used information from Statistics Canada and the National Statistical Office to measure key metrics including life satisfaction, family income, unemployment risk, average life expectancy, crime rate, and air quality. Now, when you add it all up, Alberta finished in 4th place. The top spot went to Quebec, followed by British Columbia and then Ontario. And according to the study, Saskatchewan was ranked as the least happy Canadian province. They say contributing factors included the amount of violent crime along with lower life expectancy. A very special event is coming up this Saturday here in Lethbridge. The Southern Alberta Bikers will be hosting their annual Motorcycle Awareness Event and Teddy Bear Parade. Now, to chat about it in more detail is Dallas Hardy, one of the organizers and president with the Southern Alberta Bikers Group. He joins us now from Lethbridge. Dallas, as the temperature warms up, motorcycle awareness is key, especially this time of year. What can we do as drivers and those who ride to ensure that everyone is safe on the roads?
Fortunately, we've had a pretty nice winter, a pretty mild winter, and some of us haven't put our bikes away at all, so we've been out off and on. But for the mass majority of the riders, they got their bikes tuned up, and everybody's coming out for the riding season again. So yeah, we just want to bring awareness and attention to the fact that they're back, and we've all got to share the road. It's a two-way street. I say that over and over again. It's quite a cliche, but we've got to pay attention to the four-wheelers, and we just ask that they give us the same courtesy.
Now, you're hosting a Teddy Bear Parade and are asking folks to bring donations to Honkers Pub at the north end of town on Saturday morning. So the parade begins at Honkers, and where will your group be headed?
We get together, we have breakfast at Honkers. Vicky and the group there put on a tremendous breakfast for us, and then at 10 o'clock we'll take off on a parade around town where just to make everybody aware, we're heading straight north out of Honkers up to 26th Avenue North, and then we'll go west from there over to 13th Street, and we'll come all the way down 13th Street to 10th Avenue, where we'll turn east there and head over to the hospital. So we'd appreciate if people come out, show us a little bit of support. And that portion of the day is basically designed in support of the kids at Child Life Services at Chinook Regional Hospital. So basically awareness for motorbikes and a good cause of raising some donations in the form of teddy bears and stuffies and whatnot, and some cash donations to give to Child Life Services at Chinook Regional Hospital.
Dallas Hardy, president of the Southern Alberta Bikers, thanks so much for your time today. And listen, if you're watching at home and you want more information, you can find it on the Southern Alberta Bikers Facebook page. You know, there are many thoughts when it comes to mentoring and disciplining a child. Abe Block, retired pastor, now a great-grandfather, shares some seasoned advice on the importance of teaching children and how there are consequences for kids' actions.
Discipline needs to be in moderation, but it needs to be in relation to what the problem was. Not just some wild thing out there, but try and build it so that they learn there are consequences. Look at the world today. A lot of people haven't learned consequences, and we're living with a lot of difficulty and chaos in our world because there are consequences. As you grow up and get into your job, there are going to be discipline issues. You need to learn them when you're young and when it's not so hard.
Catch more parenting tips from retired Pastor Abe Block in my interview with him coming up later in our broadcast. Well, we experienced some gusty winds today again in Lethbridge, but fairly warm. Will the warm weather continue? A full look at the weather pictures coming up shortly. Our plastic Adirondack chairs almost ended up in the neighbor's yard thanks to all of the strong winds we had in the weekend here in Lethbridge. Wow. Jeanette Rocher is now with all of the weather details. Jeanette, we also enjoyed some gusty winds today along with some fairly warm temperatures.
Yeah, but possibly for not much longer, at least for those warm temperatures, because we're about to see a big dip in temperature for the rest of the week. Now, those 50K winds still remaining around for tomorrow. So Tuesday, not a great looking day weather-wise at all. We're seeing 50K winds, temperatures going down to 8 degrees. Also seeing some rain or snowfall, and then that's going to pretty much continue through the week there. We're going to see even lower temperatures, down to 4 degrees for Wednesday and Thursday. Wednesday also seeing rain mixed with snow, mainly showers Thursday, and then could see some snowfall again on Friday, 7 degrees for a high. And then on the weekend, that's when things are going to look a little bit more seasonal. So we're seeing 15 degrees on Saturday, up to 16 on Sunday with a mix of sun uncloud. So it looks like we're going to have this little blast of winter come at us this week. 16 is the average high for this time of year. 1, the average low. 29 degrees. That was our high temperature on this day back in 1939. We were sitting at -12 back in 2005, which was the record low. 6:10, but that's when the sun rose this morning. Sunset this evening at 8:47, giving us 14 hours and 38 minutes of daylight. Okay, on the west coast, a mix of sun and cloud tomorrow. Victoria sitting at a high of 12. Same thing for Vancouver. Now, Edmonton seeing some wet flurries and rainfall beginning tonight. So 2 to 4 centimeters overnight, and could see up to 5 millimeters of rain tomorrow, high of 8 degrees. 8 degrees also for Calgary. Calgary under a special weather statement. So we are seeing snowfall beginning tonight, looking at 2 to 4 centimeters, and then more tomorrow as well. And by midweek, we could see, actually by Thursday, we could see 10 to 25 centimeters of snowfall in the Calgary area. So Alberta just getting hit with that snowfall as we are approaching the month of May. Not fair whatsoever. 13 degrees expected tomorrow in Saskatoon. Saskatoon could see some showers as well. Same thing for Regina, actually. 5 to 10 millimeters of rain. 10 for a high there. 13 expected high tomorrow in Winnipeg with mainly clear skies. As we get into the central part of the country, we are seeing more precipitation. 40% chance of drizzle or showers in Toronto tomorrow with a high of 16 degrees. 8 for a high in Ottawa and Montreal, and both of those cities looking at the potential of rain as well. Also, quite a bit of moisture expected on the east coast tomorrow. 12 for a high in Fredericton. Clear skies. Halifax not looking too bad either. Now, Charlottetown could see a 60% chance of showers tomorrow. 3 degrees for a high, and up to 20 millimeters of rain could be expected tomorrow in St. John's. 5 for a high there. So there you have it. That is your forecast.
London Drugs temporarily closed all stores in Western Canada due to an operational issue. Various news agencies reported the company shared by email that it was the victim of a cybersecurity incident. The retailer says pharmacists will be able to help with urgent needs during the closures. London Drugs has more than 80 stores across British Columbia, Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Manitoba. A movement urging people to boycott Loblaw Companies Limited has been gaining traction online. Thousands of shoppers could possibly be on board taking their grocery money elsewhere during the month of May. The boycott stems from a Reddit group where people share their frustrations with Loblaw and other major Canadian grocers. Now, some Canadians say they've already started to shop elsewhere, though it's easier said than done for people living in areas with few choices. Loblaw's new president and CEO, Per Bank, says he knows the company's reputation has suffered since pre-pandemic times. But he says Loblaw has been expanding its discount stores and offering new promotions as customers are increasingly trying to cut costs. Travelers through Toronto's Pearson International Airport may soon find a full menu option resume on flights. Around 800 workers with airline caterer Gate Gourmet say they reached a tentative agreement with the company nearly 2 weeks after walking off the job. Teamsters Canada says employees will be back on the job on Tuesday if workers approve the collective agreement in voting today. The employees for the Swiss-owned company cook, package, and deliver food and beverages to planes for service on board. Air Canada WestJet had to limit meal offerings following the recent job action. Now, here's a look at today's markets.
The TSX was up 42 points on the day to finish at 22,011. The Dow was up 146 points to 38,386. The S&P 500 was up 16 on the day to 5116, and the Nasdaq was up 55 points to 15,983. West Texas Intermediate Oil was down $1.22 to $82.63 US per barrel. Natural gas was up 11 cents to $2.03 US. Gold was down $2.30 on the day to $23.3566 US an ounce, and silver was down 6 cents to $27.14 US an ounce. Feed wheat is at $8.70 per bushel, barley's at $6.42, canola's at $13.60, and corn is at $7.92 per bushel. Live cattle were up 73 cents to $185.40. Feeder cattle May contract was down 68 cents to $248.03, and lean hogs May contract was down 25 cents to $94.03. The Canadian dollar was up slightly over the past 24 hours to $73.21 US.
Recapping one of our top stories, the Alberta government announced that the Dutch company Newcold will be investing $222 million to develop an agriculture facility in Coaldale, the first of its kind in Canada. Newcold offers innovative and sustainable cold food storage solutions. Government officials say $2 million taxpayer dollars will also help the rural stream to create 50 permanent and 200 temporary jobs. Jobs Minister Matt Jones says the project will not only create good jobs, diversify the economy, but will also help to boost Alberta's agriculture sector. The Israeli military, which is going after a number of Hamas battalions in the Gaza city of Rafah, says it will delay its military maneuvers in Rafah for now at the request of the Biden administration. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari will explain why momentarily. Listen, when you see news happening in your community, be sure to drop us an email at info@bridgecitynews.ca. Also, be sure to visit our website anytime to check out a number of stories and interviews. It appears as though Israel is going to hold off on invading Rafah following pressure from the White House. The IDF says it wants to continue in its fight to eliminate Hamas in the Gaza city, but agreed to pause their military offensive for now. Now, to chat about this in more detail is our foreign affairs expert, Lisa Daftari, who joins us once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, why did the Israeli military agree to the Biden administration's demands of holding off for now?
You know, the Israeli government finds itself in a very, very difficult position. Obviously, 6 months, those hostages have not been returned. Imagine the pressure on the Israeli government by the hostages' families. World opinion is entirely against Israel, with false data coming out of Hamas and the mainstream media. And of course, the universities, as you know, everywhere you look, there's condemnation of Israel without the proper facts. I routinely check in with John Spencer. He's a very prominent urban war specialist, and he talks about the Israeli army being probably the most humane army, and the number of casualties being the lowest it can possibly be given the situation. He also outlines how Mosul, and every war the United States has fought, has had a higher per capita death toll than we're seeing in Israel. But obviously that's not what you're hearing from the media. So you can imagine the pressure that Israel is under. And obviously here in the United States, the White House trying to curb or defang, minimize Israel's capacity to fight back the terrorists. And obviously, you know, in Israel, fighting terrorism is a 24/7 job, 365 days a week. So they are surrounded by enemies at any given moment. There are missiles coming into the country on a given day, and let alone what has happened in the aftermath of October 7th. So it's very difficult, but at the same time, because they are allied with the United States, because they rely on the United States, there's a lot of pressure coming from the White House, and they have decided to take a pause and to wait until they see what the United States says. Side by side that, as you know, we have an election coming up in this country. So the policy coming from the White House is wavering a bit to appease both sides. Whereas, you know, obviously, you know, Israel is our ally. I mean, that is a strategic relationship. It's not one based on charity. So, you know, it's interesting to watch the White House kind of pivot where, you know, Israel's enemies just want to see Israel gone off the map. These small pivots are not doing enough to appease the other side. So everyone is stuck in a bad position. But Antony Blinken this morning did say that Hamas would be stupid not to take this incredibly generous, and he used the words, incredibly generous offer by the Israelis that's on the table right now. So we shall see. A lot of people don't realize how many great offers Hamas has rejected. So when people say ceasefire now, it's not in the hands of the Israelis. Hamas, a terror organization, has every ability to put down its weapons and to surrender, making it a ceasefire.
You know, we're also seeing more and more of those student-led protests at colleges and universities across the Western world, not just here in Canada and the United States, but in Europe as well, demanding Israel stop the genocide in Gaza. Lisa, Hamas and Iran have meanwhile been in full support of the protests, including the ones taking place at Columbia University.
Right, and I tweeted this. Imagine the irony of Khamenei, the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, torturing, killing university students inside Iran. And this has been the fixation for 45 years. This government has been in power and torturing the young people of Iran, but then applauding the young people of the United States. Look how skewed these young people in the United States are, where they don't know anything, but they're siding with terror organizations. They are applauding the Islamic Republic for firing missiles into Israel. This has nothing to do with policy, I guarantee you. And it's been done. The New York Post had something last week where they interviewed a young woman and said, "What are you doing here?" She's like, "I don't know. Let me ask my friend." And her friend said, "I don't know what we're doing here, but we're here." So, this is kind of like the trend. It's the social justice crowd that basically believes, well, if you believe in XYZ human rights, this is the cause of the moment, and this is why we have to be here. It's sad because we saw the same thing during BLM. While there was a core issue, we all want equality, nobody wants racism. While we all want peace in the Middle East, nobody wants a war. This is not the way to do it. They are alienating Jewish people on campus. Yesterday, there was a gentleman who was interviewed. He was sobbing. He was sobbing because someone held a knife to him at UCLA, and he kept saying, "Just because I'm a Jew, just because I'm a Jew," and he kept saying that. I mean, I couldn't sleep last night. I was thinking about this. Where have we come as a people, where this person was targeted? What does he have to do with land in the Middle East? What does he have to do with policy in the Middle East? Obviously, he's a young man walking on campus, and he was held at knife point because he is Jewish. It's turned so ugly, and this is why you see some chancellors, some deans handling this properly and doing away with it in minutes. There's a woman at Pomona College here in California, and these pro-Hamas protesters, and I say that for a reason, they're not pro-Palestinian and they're not anti-Israel, they're pro-Hamas protesters. They basically raided the building where the chancellor and the dean's offices are, and she caught them in the stairwell and said, "If you don't clear this area in 10 minutes, you're going to be suspended. You're done. You're out of the school." And she actually held her word. Most of the students cleared out, and the ones who didn't were expelled from the school. That's exactly how to deal with this. This is not a matter of free speech. This is not a matter of peaceful protest, because it is none of those things. This is actually siding with terrorism. This is alienating the Jewish students. This is showing anti-Semitism. And that's why we're seeing certain segments of the population come out, whether it's certain lawmakers or certain donors who are pulling the funding and really trying to do away with it. And it's unbelievable to me how, over at Columbia University, they don't see it that way. They've allowed this to just pour over. And I have some sources who are there at the pro-Israel side at Columbia University, and they have told me that they've basically these protesters have taken over even the sidewalk. They intimidate people walking by the sidewalk or getting out of the subway right there in front of Columbia University. I mean, that's public property. And if the police is not protecting anyone, whether any American who's trying to get by, this is horrific. This is just, it's going to get worse and worse. And if they don't really get that message that they need to stop this bully behavior, it's just going to continue.
And the pro-Hamas demonstrations on post-secondary campuses, yes, are becoming more intense and even violent in recent days. And now, Lisa, lawmakers are calling for a change. U.S. Senator Rick Scott even sent a letter to the Columbia University Board of Trustees with an ultimatum. You take action against anti-Semitism or you lose federal funding.
Great. I mean, that's the way it should be. And I think there's too few voices on this. We saw a few billionaires over the last week say the same thing. We're pulling our funding. The issue with this, Hal, as you know, is that we have other countries come in and pick up the slack. We can have Qatar come in, you can have Iran's regime come in, you can have China come in. And what happens is, these prominent Americans who have been giving funding to the school, they're not involved in indoctrination. They have their name on a building, right? But those countries and those influences that I just mentioned, they get into the school. They buy a chair, they buy a department, they buy mines. And that's the scary part here, is that, yes, these American investors or entrepreneurs or alums that are pulling their funding, those who are going to replace them are much more dangerous and will add so much more to the current problem of indoctrination. Obviously, these young people have no idea. They weren't even alive during 9/11. So to side with a terror organization, I mean, either their schooling failed, their parents failed, everyone's failed them, obviously, because this is ridiculous. The fact that they don't really have the information, or they can decide emotionally and then have a certain segment of the university population, a certain segment of the media, a certain segment of the influencers that are around validate their feelings and say they actually are feelings, right? when you can identify as a cat or dog, I guess you can have any feeling you want and have it be, fact. Emotion is fact right now. It's really tough times. And again, if we don't get ahead of this whole entire generation, imagine when this generation is in office, when the entire Senate and Congress is made up of this TikTok generation, what will be of the United States? What will be of Canada? What will be of Europe and the world? I think we're headed in a very, very dangerous, direction. And this is the cautionary tale.
Lisa, the House of Representatives Israel aid bill is under scrutiny for including more than $9 billion in humanitarian assistance. Now, many people believe that the money is not actually making it to provide help for the Palestinian people, but instead is falling into the hands of the terrorist group Hamas. So let me ask you, is there any way to prevent this from happening?
Unfortunately not, because who is the leadership over there? It is Hamas, and people don't understand this. If you truly care about the Palestinian people, you have to call out Hamas. You have to get rid of any terror entity that chooses to influence the Palestinian people. Look, before October 7th, we saw protests on the streets in Gaza. Of course, it's very dangerous. These are very brave people who were out on the streets protesting Hamas. After October 7th, you have a higher percentage, and this is assuming that these polls are somewhat accurate and give us somewhat of a glimpse into what's going on over there. You have a higher percentage of people supporting Hamas and standing behind Hamas. Now, is that because they feel like they're winning against Jews and they're anti-Semitic? Is it because they feel as though, well, Hamas is the only one who's going to have our backs, or is it out of fear? And it may be all three in different segments of the population. But the point being, they have hijacked the entire Palestinian people, and many of them are willing and many of them are not and silent. But regardless, when we give that money over to, when it's well-intentioned aid and money over to the Palestinians, we can't say it's because Israel's not giving aid or not allowing aid to get in there. We have to understand that it's Hamas that is the gatekeeper. It's Hamas that puts young children in harm's way. It's Hamas that puts them in hospitals. It's Hamas that puts bombs in schools and hospitals and mosques. And really, to understand, if we truly want to get to the root of this problem, we have to rid the entire region of radicalism. That's starting with Iran's regime, and it goes throughout, because that's where they're spreading their money and their influence inside Yemen and Lebanon and Syria and Iraq, and of course, Gaza and the West Bank.
Lisa, tensions between Israel and Hezbollah also continue to climb. Now, France's foreign minister headed to Lebanon recently to help ease some of those tensions. Apparently, some progress has been made.
We shall see, because this is, Iran's regime that is able to, take the temperature up and bring it down. So for a while, we saw some cooling because Iran's regime was launching those rockets from Iran soil into Israel and kind of took a step back with the Houthi attacks on the ships in the Red Sea, or Hezbollah, for example. But what many people don't know is that missiles have continuously been falling into Israel from the north, from Lebanon, where Hezbollah is headquartered. Now, the fear here is that Hezbollah will, instead of just lobbing missiles into Israel, will escalate and fight Iran's war, the Islamic Republic's war, in the shadow war that they have been, obviously, again, continuously fighting, but to escalate that and to lob more missiles into Israel and to really go further into Israel, which they have been doing since the retaliation we saw last week. Hezbollah is the most well-endowed terror proxy of Iran's regime. They have over 100, some say 200,000 missiles in their arsenal. And that would be a tough fight for Israel to thwart in, side by side in conjunction with the current war against Hamas. That is the fear. Look, Israel is surrounded, as I said before. This is by design. Obviously, the Islamic Republic's ring of fire that they have wanted to create is that influence around Israel in order to surround it. And when you say, France has gone over there, this is the problem with the Europeans and the West in general in stopping Iran's regime's advances in the region. We are always playing catch up. This is something that many of us experts have been pushing for a very long time. The United States gives aid money to the Lebanese Free Army to actually, we were pushing for them to actually create safe zones inside Lebanon where Hezbollah was not allowed to go. Many Lebanese people, most Lebanese people, especially those who are Christian, which is a large percentage of the population, the Maronite, they have wanted an area to nation build, to build up the country again, free of this cancer, which is Hezbollah. And many of us have been pushing to say, with the aid money that we give to the Lebanese Free Army, the army, what we should do is to pressure them. There should be a contingency to create these safe zones, especially in the center of the country, so that they can nation build. But they have refused to punish any tentacle of Iran's regime, including Hezbollah, including the Houthis that came off the terror list when the Biden administration came into office. So these are all consequences of the same dominoes that have been placed by this administration to not want to face this head on before the problem was created. Now here we are playing catch up. So, this is all by design. This is all consequences of a weak foreign policy and not understanding or not wanting to understand the enemy, and now trying to fight it, in hindsight. And it's very, very difficult to do that.
Let's talk a bit about your president, Joe Biden. A new poll released by Gallup says that Joe Biden is one of the least popular U.S. presidents in history. His 38.7% approval rating ranks below Richard Nixon and Jimmy Carter. Now, the results may indicate that he'll have a pretty tough time running for re-election this fall against Donald Trump.
38% I think is pretty generous, because when you do speak to Americans, people are not happy. And it's not just about the wars that are going on between Russia and Ukraine or the wars going on in the Middle East, but more so, the day-to-day for every average American, the rise in crime, the price of gas, the price of produce and eggs and milk and basic things. So people are not very happy. What is troublesome here is that it's going to be an election for Donald Trump or against Donald Trump. It's not going to be about Joe Biden. And that's where we might not see this even come into play. The fact that he has made so many mistakes, that he continues to fall, his age is really coming into question. It should have come into question a long time ago, but now I think they have done either a worse job at hiding his mistakes, or it's just by design to maybe, swap him out with a different, which people still think will happen at the last moment. But we shall see. I think we're going to see a lot of different things happen between now and November. So it will be a very colorful election season.
U.S. political reporter and foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, thanks so much for joining us once again from Los Angeles.
My pleasure.
I think it's safe to say that parenting has always been a challenge. We learn from our successes and our failures. Books, training courses, and those with parenting experience also really helps along the way. Today we're joined by Abe Block, who's a parent, grandparent, and now even a great-grandparent, and a retired pastor here in Lethbridge. He has some parenting tips for us. Welcome back to Bridge City News, Abe.
Thank you. It's good to be here, and it's good to be with all the listeners that are tuning in.
Absolutely, and the viewers too. Now, one thing that probably hasn't changed over the years, Abe, is that siblings tend to have conflicts as they grow up together. Brothers and sisters, various disagreements and arguments. Do you have any advice on how to reduce the frequency of this to get your kids to maybe learn to disagree with each other and still love each other?
That's a major issue. Back in my day, and of course that was a while ago, you'll understand, things were a little different. You did mention that today things have changed. They've changed dramatically, but I think one of the biggest issues, Hal, is the lack of communication. I look at the world today and I understand the young people watching the world today, and what do they see? They see a lot of disagreement. They see a lot of arguing. They see a lack of communication in our society, in our governments relating to people and to us. Wars and rumors of wars. And you look at Haiti in the world today, if you're following that at all, it's absolute chaos. And you say to yourself, this is what our children are seeing. Is it any surprise that they think the natural thing is to disagree and to argue? The other issue could be that if you don't agree with me, you can't be my friend. And so I think that's one of the key issues. And so we as parents, we need to set up a time. The Bible says, train up a child in the way that it should go. And when it is old, it will remember and learn and be. How do we train? The other thing that reminds me is that in our world as well, we have husband and wife working so much out of the home. So where do we find time to train and to teach? With my children, I set up what I call the Yes But Conference every so often, where we would sit down every child could speak what their issues were, what they liked, what they didn't like, and no one could respond negatively. Each one got a chance, and that meant that we as parents were listening. We heard them. And then we also had opportunity to train and respond. I think that's one of the biggest things. If we can't train, how are they going to learn? And we live in chaos.
Yeah, communication is key, absolutely, for siblings and then parents to their kids. Now, how about forgiveness and apologies, Abe? How important are they as we develop a stronger relationship with our kids and grandkids?
I think that's a great thing. Apologies and forgiveness work together. And it depends on what is an apology. You see, so often in our world, we simply hear, well, I'm sorry. And what kind of a response? Oh, don't even think about it. Well, that's not dealing with anything. If I'm going to apologize, I need to apologize to the issue. What was the issue? That's what I'm apologizing for, and it needs to be from the heart. And then the response needs to be a response to the issue. Never say, oh, it was nothing. What needs to be said is, yes, you hurt me, and I thank you for the apology, and I really want to forgive you. But that doesn't mean that there's going to be reconciliation. When the apology is correct and the response is to the issue, you're opening the door for reconciliation. And I think that's one of the keys in all of this. I think back to what our government is trying to do with truth and reconciliation with our Aboriginal people. Okay, where's the truth and what's the reconciliation? Have we ever spelled it out? And so if you don't spell these things out to each other, it's just, I'm sorry, don't worry about it. That doesn't go anywhere in my books.
Abe, let's talk about discipline for just a moment here. I know when my son was younger, he hated the fact we put him in the corner, standing all alone in the corner, you know, to show some discipline, but he'd appreciate it afterwards, and he would apologize, and we would clear the air about certain things, maybe if there's a misunderstanding as well. How important is discipline and maybe setting up that structure for our kids today?
I think discipline is increasingly important. In our world, if there's not going to be that kind of a setup, the world isn't going to cater to you. For example, I see a lot of parents in the modern world saying to their 2-year-old child, what do you want for breakfast? Day after day, what do you want for lunch, et cetera, et cetera. You know, that child is way too young to make those decisions.
Chocolate. I want chocolate. Give me chocolate.
I want chocolate.
And ice cream, right?
That's not going to be the world they get into at all. And so I think discipline needs to be in moderation, but it needs to be in relation to what the problem was. Not just some wild thing out there, but try and build it so that they learn there are consequences. Look at the world today. A lot of people haven't learned consequences, and we're living with a lot of difficulty and chaos in our world because there are consequences. As you grow up and get into your job, there are going to be discipline issues. You need to learn them when you're young and when it's not so hard.
Let's circle back to structure for just a moment here, Abe. How important is it to really set up the boundaries for our kids?
Well, I think that's the key issue. If the kids raised without any boundaries when they're young, they're not going to expect any boundaries when they go and work in an organization, and there are going to be boundaries, and they've never learned that. So how are they going to deal with boundaries when they've got a job if they've never learned it when they're young? We need to teach when they're younger so that they learn it and walk into life and walk into occupations and walk into situations with people where they need to learn to listen. And I think a lot of our young people do want boundaries. I remember the one dad talking to me, and his daughter was invited by the school to an issue where she knew she probably shouldn't go. And so she said to her dad, "Dad, will you please tell me I can't go? That way I save face when I face my kids, and you can take the blame, but you're not in the picture." I think that works.
Now, what's the balance between setting healthy boundaries, Abe, and on the flip side, giving your kids and maybe your teenagers some freedom?
I think the freedom comes when they learn where the freedom is within boundaries. For example, for the younger children, give them space, but set the boundaries. For example, I know some girls when they start school, they already want to dress the way they want to dress. And so I would suggest to the mother, pick up what you think are reasonable ones, but give them an option about 3 or 4. But don't give them an option of the whole expanse of what they have, because that's not suitable. So let them make choices within boundaries so that they learn, okay, I can make a choice, but there are boundaries, because in life, that's how it's going to be. I'm going to have boundaries, but I'm also going to be able to learn how to make choices. Like with finances, give them small finances at the beginning so they can learn to be responsible and accountable, but within the boundaries of whatever their finances are.
Now let's talk about, we mentioned the boundaries, but how about when your kids disagree with you when it comes to set boundaries? You know, I used to ask my father, well, why can't I do this? He said, because I said so. That was always his reasoning behind it, right? Well, no, kids need more than that. So how do we nurture that relationship and create a positive, healthy relationship when we're setting those boundaries?
Well, I can think of an example in my own life. My one daughter didn't have her driver's license yet, and she worked at a record shop, and the guy had a beautiful souped up, well, not a souped up car, but a very nice car, but he wanted to sell it. And she looked at that car and she wanted to buy it all the best way. So what can I do but say no? No, I didn't say no. I sat down with her. I said, okay, how can we work this out? Because you can't even drive it. If you're going to buy it, it's going to sit on the yard and just whatever. So I happened to have a friend who taught mechanics in the school, and he needed vehicles to teach mechanics to the kids. So I said to my daughter, go ahead and buy the thing. Let's talk to this guy, see if he'll take the car, use it for a whole year in the school. You'll get a car that's fixed up by the time you can drive it. That way you can get it, but there are boundaries set up and you're going to have to wait for it. I think if we can set up things like that with our kids to make them feel positive and yet within some kind of control factors, I think that might work.
You know, it's funny, when I was 16, I bought my first car, an old Datsun. I had just enough money, $1,000 to buy it, but it was a manual transmission, so I had to learn how to shift the manual transmission, and then I had to save up more money to insure it and register to put it on the road, so that took another 3-4 months. So
exactly, but that's a good plan. That works.
Yeah, it was a lesson, a life lesson, absolutely. So Abe, how important is it for parents to maybe play some games or activities with their kids to help maybe draw them a little closer for bonding, like bonding time with our children?
We talked about communications before. What better way to communicate with your kids than either play games with them or to do sports with them? It opens the door to conversation, and communication is the best thing. And especially if you're catering to some of their desires, even if you're not an athlete or anything, but you can support, you can be there, et cetera, et cetera. I think I've done a lot of counseling, and I asked this one couple once, what do you remember most about your parents? And the one person said, my dad was at every game I ever played. But the other person said, my dad loved me more than I could ever imagine. You know, those are two opposites, but they're both beautiful, and they bring in communication. I think we have forgotten the idea of communicating and then still disagreeing, but communicating and loving each other anyway. We don't have to think the same, but we need to be on the same page in the final end.
You know what I've noticed as a parent myself as well of 2 kids, my son and my daughter, is praising them, especially with their successes and helping them through their failures as well. What did we learn? Like a life lesson that's learned here. Abe, another big part of parenting is the process of passing our faith onto our children. How can we do this most effectively?
Well, we need to find time, first of all. I mean, like I said before, with all parents doing so much working outside of the home, and I'm not decrying that. It's a necessity in our world, I think. But it seems like that takes away time. And putting your faith in an encouraging way with your children is going to take time. And part of that time, I, for example, like to have devotions once a day. My dad had devotions every supper time. We always took 15, 20 minutes for him to teach us his faith. And then he had a question and answer period after we had eaten, if we had any questions about it. The other thing is, can we take them either to home groups or to Bible study groups or to church or to places like that? And that refers me back to how communicative is my church to everybody and including youth? Do I have people in the church that can communicate and relate to the young people and build their faith? But it's got to start at home. We cannot depend on the church to do it all. We are responsible to begin that process when they're young. And then we encourage them as they mature to find it in other places as well.
And very important to live our faith as well. Abe, I think most of us as children when we were younger had some insecurity issues. What child didn't? Any thoughts on the importance of hugging and loving our children, like the physical touch and communicating that love to our children?
Well, you're talking to the wrong guy. I'm a hugger and I love to hug, but I have to be very careful. In our modern world, that's not accepted by everybody. It's not even accepted by society in many ways. We have become very individualistic. And so I have had to become very sensitive to how people feel about being hugged and about touching. I remember, especially during COVID, now this was during COVID, but out in New Brunswick, there was a kindergarten boy who hugged one of the kindergarten girls and they took him to court. Now that's really extreme, but they did take him to court because he wasn't supposed to hug anybody. But you know, we are missing the personal touch. That is so encouraging. And if we can just live with it without reacting, I think it's a very positive thing. I think touch is crucial. The Bible tells us, what did Jesus do? He took the little children and he put them on his lap. And I'm thinking he hugged them. Suffer the little children to come unto me and forbid them not. We have gotten to the stage of a little bit too much forbidding. I think the encouragement needs to be there.
You know, you're right. The human interaction is vital to healthy relationships, whatever
Yes.
they are. Now, it seems we're getting busier and busier these days, Abe, with scattered schedules for parents, many different family members always on the road. How important is it to sit down during family time and have meals together?
I think that's a key. In my family, when I grew up, we always had at least one meal together. The supper meal, we were together. Nowadays, with the kids scattering all over the place, the parents taking them here and there, find one meal where you can be together. Even at the beginning of the day, that's not possible anymore. Some dads are leaving at 6 o'clock in the morning and the kids aren't even out of bed yet, getting ready for school. There needs to be a place. It doesn't have to be around a meal. I like the meal idea because that's open discussion. That's where everybody's just relaxed and they're eating and they're joking and it's a good place for interaction and for discussion and for questions. But nowadays, it's hard to sit down to a meal together with even the kids going all over the place. But my idea is somewhere, find a time in the day, and if it's not every day, find a time somewhere during the week, a couple of times, to sit together as a family. That's relationships. That's necessary in many areas of our lives.
Let's sit down and break bread together. Abe Block is a retired Lethbridge pastor. He's also a grandfather, great-grandfather, and of course a father. Thanks so much for some of the great parenting advice today, Abe.
My joy. God bless.
You as well. On behalf of all of us here at Bridge City News, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless. Thanks for watching.